You're listening to Tech Recruit, a podcast that educates talent acquisition and recruitment professionals on innovation to attract talent across all industries. We're glad you're here. Welcome to the Tech Recruit podcast. My name is Stacey Broadwell, and today I have with me Mr. Enpei Lam. He is working with AON Consulting as the Director of People Analytics. Welcome, Enpei.
Well, thanks for having me.
We're very excited to have you as well. You just flew in from London, so I know this. You're probably dealing with some time lapse there. What were you doing out there?
A little bit. Well, you know, I went to visit our global headquarters over there in London, and also went to a friend's wedding. So.
Oh, business and pleasure.
Yes.
So tell me about your current role as the Director of People Analytics.
So as you know, the Director of People Analytics, I'm really leading a team of data scientists, you know, on our consulting group, helping with our clients to solve their people analytics and planning, you know, issues and challenges. You know, a couple larger topic will be, you know, helping them to build up a strategic workforce planning function. And you know, recently, you know, a rather hot topic, you know, which is a little bit unrelated to our talk today, would be the gender pay equity analysis that we also offer. So we offer a whole spectrum of, you know, analytics and planning, you know, solution around HR. So that's basically, you know, what we do.
Such a very evolving and current trend that we're seeing in HR is the amount of companies that are trying to really harness that data within HR and not certain where they should start or what data that is relevant to that. And do you help them when they're trying to determine where to start with that journey?
Yeah, most of the clients have their HRIS system set up pretty good. You know, being an internal practitioner before, I know that, you know, sometimes it could be challenging and, you know, just getting the data right. So, you know, a majority of the time we'll spend, you know, making sure the data is right, you know, confirming, validating the data with the client before we run into analytics. So, yeah. I mean, you know, throughout the journey, I felt like, you know, companies are really focusing a lot more around, you know, building the HR data, you know, more accurately and correctly, you know, in order to understand what is really going on within the company.
Being somebody who worked as a data analyst and pulling data from multiple data sites into one source to tell a story and model that story and explain it to your executive board is really so dependent on the quality of your data. And in recruiting, when I moved into the recruiting role, there was times when I was working internally at companies and just putting the data into the applicant tracking system on the talent attraction recruitment side, there was some ambiguity. You know, how do you discharge a candidate? What is everybody using when a candidate isn't qualified versus we don't want to talk to this candidate again? They're not a fit. And oftentimes that was not clearly stated. And so that could definitely interrupt the quality of the data that you're pulling. And so I wonder if that initial thing becomes a challenge for you.
Absolutely, you hit it right on spot. So it's the good and bad about, you know, working with strategic workforce planning. The good thing is, you know, you really have a holistic view, you know, across the company. This is a cross-functional team that, you know, you have to work with different departments. You have to work with HR, you work with compensation, recruitment, you work with the finance department, you work with the operation management, you know, side of the business also. You really to build up a plan, you know, from A to Z to figure out, you know, what is the people need there, how much FTE that we will need, you know, what would be the staffing mix? Do we have the budget for that? Do we have the physical capacity for the work? And also then, you know, advise and implement the strategy around it to make it happen. that's the good thing. That's the exciting part. That's the fun part. The not so fun part is like what you mentioned. You can have competing data sources. You can have overlapping data sources that you have to gather from. From the business side, for some of the industries, they track the utilization, right? The business demand and all that. I used to work at healthcare, so we track all the patient usage, the inpatient, patient days, patient encounters, and all that. And in the tech side, you will have project development, those engineering projects that you have to track, and that would translate to how much people that you need. And of course, that those two are probably different systems, and you have probably another systems, tracking recruitment, right? How many people are how many postings do you have? How many requisitions are ongoing? How long are the requisitions have been going on? How many are filled? How many are canceled? Those are probably not the same as the HRIS system that you will have. And of course, you have to merge them together. There are some technologies or solutions, out out there already off the shelf that you can purchase. But if Stacey, you can come up with one software or one application that goes across the whole spectrum, you're gonna be very, very rich. And because this is gonna be a very sought after application, because I have yet to see it. There are some solutions out there, but it doesn't cover the whole A to Z. So that's why we're here.
Yeah, and definitely I see that as being opportunities for companies to take advantage of. And so we're talking about workforce planning, and which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you and People Analytics on the show today, because one of my previous podcasts, we talked about more so on the talent attraction recruitment side and having that quality data. And our guest had mentioned when she received the workforce planning numbers that she put those into her spreadsheet, into her and developed her calculations for managing her own team. And before that happened, before she was able to do that, I was zeroed in on the workforce planning component of it. And in that, obviously, it is all about your budget as far as how many people you're going to hire across the company and across all departments, right? It always comes down to budget initially. But in the workforce planning initial onset, have you worked in that area?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So, and you're hitting all the right questions. I have to say, but budget is always a tricky part. And throughout my journey building up the workforce planning and analytics team, we've run into mistakes and setbacks. Not really including finance, at the beginning of the conversation. You have to bring a finance guy into the conversation early on, because they've got the money, they've got the budget, and they can tell you. You can forecast out, you need 10 more FTE, but they only have the money for 2. And if you already, run through all your analytics, that could be, it would be hard to say, but it could be a waste of time, at the end of the day, when finance doesn't approve your calculation and all that. So it's very crucial to bring in finance as well as operation management, and of course your talent acquisition recruitment team into the conversation very early on, to set everybody on the same level. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to calculate it, and we're going to work with finance to make sure that this calculation or prediction of FTE that we're running, this algorithm, is valid, and get them signed off from that. Right. So then you calculate out your FTE, then then they will be in agreement. And sometimes you might think that finance people, they're not very open-minded, they only work with a budget, but no, throughout my experience, are some very open-minded partners that I've worked with from finance. They're very open to looking at really how much people do we need, how should we set the budget, instead of like a 2%, 3% growth, doesn't really care about what the business need is. They want to see based on the calculation that we all work together on, how much percent they should increase the budget with. Is it really 2 or 3% like, we've been doing for the past 10 years? Or is it really, hey, they're really short, in order to be in compliance, in order to be more effective, we have to boost it up to a little bit more, like 4 to 5%. And depending on the staffing mix and productivity, we can adjust the budget accordingly to that. Or is this department is really running inefficient? I mean, it could go both ways, right? So no, you're not getting a 3% like the past 10 years. You're only getting 2 or 1% growth because you can actually run more efficiently in this department. So my point is that include as many key partners as possible into the conversation as early on, so be open and transparent about the algorithm and formula that you're using. Have a candid discussion with everybody, so that at the end of the day, everybody's looking at the same number. Everybody will be agreeing upon the result that is coming up. Whether we can do it, maybe not. Maybe if the analytics point to a 5% increase in budget and we really can't do it, then we have to work around it. Looking at staffing mix, looking at productivity, but at least they won't just shut the door and say that you're crazy, right? So yeah, it's very important to include all parties into the conversation as early as possible.
So I am so interested in the entire process from beginning to end of where this begins, how it falls into your hands, and how you put it out there. So like your end products. And so the catalyst for your job would be perhaps it's growth in the company. So the executive board determines we want to grow X amount. We're going to open up these new offices. We're going to need a staff. And so that comes down to you, or perhaps would that be a correct assessment or a statement?
That could be one big reason. One big reason they would come to us is that we're growing out, we're building out this new hub or new branch, right, of our operation. How do we gonna staff it? Are we gonna just transfer people from the existing place to there, or are we gonna hire from there? What we actually have done, and we have provided some services for the clients, is location analysis, right? So before we picked out a location, how do we look at, we're gonna look at whether there are people over there for us to hire, right? Is it already, the market is overheated? Do you want to set up a tech company in San Francisco Bay Area? Maybe not, because the market is just so overheated, and then you're competing with Google, you're competing with Uber, and all those like giants. We won't advise our clients to set up the new hub there. We actually have clients asking us, we don't even want to look at Austin, or we don't want to look at Denver or Boulder, Colorado. Those are the new and emerging hubs. We want to look at, the next hub, that's coming up. It could be Milwaukee, it could be Boise, Idaho. We don't know, right? So they want to get into the market as, before the other, to really get the talents that are available out there. And, and the cost is also, talent cost is always a issue there. And at AON, we really have that data to look at the sectorial talent availability and pricing. So I've digressed a little. So going back to
no, that's perfect. That's really interesting.
how we get asked for the work. So location, opening up a new branch or operation is one reason. Another reason could be, we're not really opening up any new branches, but we try to change our business model, right? We try to change our operation a little bit. In-housing, in-sourcing, the work that we have contracted out. How is it gonna look like, right? Or do we have the capacity? And where should we hiring the people from? Should we hire from within? Should we develop, some of our talents from within, or should we look out to hire from outside, right? As we're sourcing. And if there's a huge retirement or turnover risk, right? In a particular place, and they will come to us, hey, oh my God, we're changing our retirement benefit, or are we experience a large turnover for a known reason, so figure out, what is really going on within the department. Is it engagement? Do we have some, what do we call those, toxic managers, right? What would be the reason, right? For those
that attrition,
people.
right?
Right. So those are all the questions that we'll get, and then, and then they would come down to us and say, hey, try to figure this out. And in the process, work with different departments to figure out what will be the outcome. Do we have to change the budget? Do we have to build, new, all the capital planning, team. So these are all the channels that will come down, to us when they have questions around workforce planning.
So those are really great catalysts. The location, whether they're going to move or whether, it's funny because oftentimes you see a new Starbucks pop up and you're like, I wonder how they chose that corner,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it could be Starbucks or a chain retail, that really focusing on growing rapidly. I think they focus more on the revenue. So most of them will have a revenue target, and I'm not speaking for all the companies, but some of the chain companies, like retailer mostly, they have a revenue target, and as soon as they get to a certain target year over year, then they will start looking at say a 3 or 5 mile radius within that. You can't be too close, right? So, but they will look at proximate area to build up their next stores. Starbucks may be a little easier because it's not as labor intensive, when compared to other retailer, right? Like Target or Walmart and such like that. So different company has different strategy, but for those that are more labor intensive, like the tech or healthcare, right? They will want to focus a lot more on picking the right place to build up their new hub.
What would their goal be then? Talent, retirees, for a healthcare company. So you were saying how there's a catalyst for them bringing you in, and then there's a goal, right?
Right.
And so it could be a revenue-driven goal, like a retail company might have, and then a healthcare company would have a different goal. What would theirs be?
So it could be coming from multiple. There could be multiple purposes, right? As they're looking at all these reasons. So for location, they might be looking for building up, reaching out to a new community, right? Establishing their brand a little better, so that they have presence in the community. And and in order to do that, they have to choose the place wisely, right? So if they're setting up a new, say, home health facility or nursing home facility, they have to make sure that there are enough nurses for that particular with those particular license and skills in that area, right? So that they can get the talent more effectively there. For tech company, when they're setting up a new hub, they have to make sure that they have enough engineers around there, but not already working for other giants and hard to get. We will look at university, look at pipeline, look at the living cost and all that, in order to figure out where would be an ideal location to do that. For new business model or operation, right? So they want to see how can they run more effectively, right? Can we expand the business, using just existing talent, right? We'll kind of reshuffle the people a little bit. We change the staffing mix a little bit to make it run more effectively. So then, people will also, trying to understand what the people preferences, right? Some people really want to be a contractor instead of a full-time, right? And how do we kind of, come up with a mix and then match with people's preferences, in order to, run the business more happily, and more effectively. Turnover in retirement, really trying to figure out, what would be the impact on the operation if we have, this mass exodus of people leaving. And if there really is, how do we prepare for that? How do we train up? Do we want to train up the existing talent, or do we want to backfill them, with external source? And whether there are like people out there for you to backfill. So those would be the goal and the solution that we'll recommend. And we can't do everything, right? I mean, we rely heavily on our talent acquisition partner to fill all the positions that we'll need, and we can and forecast out in order to have the people working at the right place at the right time.
It's such an interesting challenge. And to kind of go back to what you were saying earlier, would be if there was one tool that could help you make all these decisions, from the catalyst to the goal to the ratio of the correct number of new hires to contract and full-time, and what that means to the healthier company. I mean, that's the challenge. That's what you're trying to help companies do.
Right. And that's the tool that I'm expecting you to come up with, right, Stacey?
We're going to go into business together.
Right.
Enpei and Broadwell.
Okay. Yeah, this will be a daunting task, but I mean, you shall be rewarded very handsomely, if we do come up with such a solution. And every company, I mean, most of the companies would love to have that, right? From A to Z, from forecasting business need to converting that to workforce demand, and how we're gonna meet that workforce demand by training up, or hiring from within, or hiring from external, right? And what would that budget look like? And what would be the impact on business effectiveness, right? Are we saving money? Are we producing more? And also, just make it more complicated. You have the staffing mix. You also have the skill set differences, right? So different, even if you're looking at the same engineering job group, you have different type of engineers that can do different things. Some could build model. Some could create web platform infrastructure. Some can develop app, to convert those algorithm or product to be hosted onto the app. Some would do user interface, right, to make sure that it's working correctly when the user is using it. So a whole spectrum of skills that it could be thrown into this mix and make things a lot more complicated. But at the end of the day, what our job as consultants do is to really piece all these moving parts together, and then provide a solution and an answer, right? And helping our client to implement the strategy that we've come up with.
I wish there was a tool that would help us find where the quality of our candidates is coming from. Like, everybody wants a tool to help them, that magic button.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, we have, like I said, the QE tool is about skill, matching. So
you know what, I was like, how is there not a quality of hire tool? I think he was mostly looking at if they hired somebody from LinkedIn, like the source, if they hired from LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever they came from, or if they were an internal referral, which of those candidates was most successful, or stayed with them the longest? What was the most successful hire? And I was like, can't you just do a like some coding or a predictive model? That seems like it would be an easy, maybe it's not. It seems like it would be easy enough.
Yeah, exactly. You and I are thinking about the same thing, but it just, it just doesn't really happen. It could be lack of data. It could be, the skill set keeps changing, So, and there's too many factors that that could impact, whether an employee is a good hire or a good fit, versus is not. So, yeah, that's another tool for you.
I was thinking if it was, I don't know, quality of hire. I don't know. Probably because I'm older now, that I feel like the quality of hire would probably have more to do with where they're at in their life, whether they have children or if they're single and they're like, just want the experience, or if they want something that's more stable versus if they came from LinkedIn or an internal referral. But that was just
right. The sourcing, that's an interesting question, and I mean. I hate to tell you, but there's no conclusion around it. So,
there's not.
no, right?
Yeah. People are crazy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
they're unpredictable.
We just haven't really figured out, what would be the factor to determine, which source is the best source to get candidates, right? So, and people are all over the place. I mean, you can get a top-notch one from Craigslist, and you don't even understand why. And internal transfer could be somebody that you regret hiring. I mean, it just yeah
It's just timing in recruitment. It's all about just being in the right place. Somebody just had a bad day, you happen to call them about an opportunity and they're like, yes, get me out of here. I mean, you hear stories like that all the time. I think it's just timing.
Yep. It could be a gamble, but certainly something we should figure out.
The workforce planning, the pay, and the analysis of all the solutions. Those are the three things that you offer as a consultant, right?
Right.
And try to streamlining all those together. As a recruiter, you are definitely charged with understanding your market and where all the talent is. And in college, we always did these. I would go into the library and you open up these big books and dust would fly out and you determine where all you do these market maps, right? And they were very intensive, long reports. And I used to offer those to all my clients, just written out, who their competitor, like the SWOT analysis, where the competitors were, where the universities, kind of like what you were mentioning earlier.
Right.
There's certainly tools that can pull that data now, thank goodness. And and then, I guess I should ask, are there certain tools that you use, or does Radford use, or AON Consulting?
Yeah. Right. So there's certain tools that we partner with in order to bring the solution to the client. And AON owns a couple tools that we use to help with the clients to solve the problem. So and they're very specific. Each tool is very specific. So like I told you, we still need a tool out there to cover the A to Z. So we have a tool called QE. It's spelled like cute. It looks at the skill discrepancy or the skill matches of all the talents that you have within, and really determining what is the deficiency, or what is the outlook in the skill set that we'll need in order to meet the business need. So that's one tool that we own. There are the tools that we partner with called Thatum. That's also that also looks at the skill set matching, and also predictive. There's some predictive component in it to look out what will be the future skill set that will be needed in the market. So there's Anaplan, there's Visier, there's Vimo workforce prediction or workforce planning tool. So there are a whole series of tools that they're out there, and they're some are pretty specific, some are broader, and they do serve a lot of different functions, and that would cater to the client need. But there's still work to be done in order to link up all the dots. Linking up to the internal HRIS system, linking up into the talent acquisition, mostly Taleo, for most of the companies, to really understand, what are the gap there, and then how do we tackle it.
I recall at some point, there were, I believe it was IBM had these ratios that were typical for, growth companies or enterprise level companies, small and larger or medium. And it was, so for every X amount of employees, you would have maybe 2 help desk professionals. Or
Right.
for every X amount of employees, you would have 4 software engineers. And it was just like these kind of standardized ratios. Do you
Right.
have something like that you guys kind of utilize, or is it constantly changing, or do you kind of just have this standard ratio and then you kind of benchmark with that and go from there?
Right, a ratio could be very, very helpful to set the conversation, to start with the analysis, right? So, and it's almost like, looking at a current state, So right now, how many people do we have, and as we're growing, how much people we will need based on the ratio. The ratio could be constantly changing, because of the change in business environment and change in skill set, and coming up with the jobs that can do multiple things at the same time. So but racial would be very important if there's a compliance issue in it. So do you have to maintain certain nurses to patients, right? Do you have to maintain certain number of how many what would be the cap of patients that a physician, a family doctor can have, right? Those are essential. And it's more fluid in other sectors, right? In tech company, some engineers can probably handle more projects than the others. So and then at that point you probably have to draw an average to look at the ratio, and the ratio will be constantly changing. So it's one of the very important component in the whole predictive analytics formula. So
certainly. I've had clients reach out to me for those ratios, and looking back, I think that they were just looking for budget so they can hire within their department and justify doing that.
Right.
But they could be useful as at least a conversation starter,
right.
If you're a hiring manager.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm very interested in the structure of the team and the predictive side. But first, before we get to that, I want to ask about your career growth, how you got into doing workforce and people analytics. How did that start?
Yeah, so before I got into this, I was in grad school. I was doing my master's in economics, focusing on labor economics, and I went to UF Washington, very statistic focused institution, and from there, I got hired by Kaiser Permanente, coming back down to beautiful Southern California for the sunshine and all that. So I was hired by Kaiser to really look at the workforce development piece. So this predated all the people analytics and planning. I was in the development team, looking at, as an analyst, looking at how many people we should train and what kind of job that we should train for, to actually meet the need. And the team grew, got some attention around the leadership, saying, hey, this guy, why don't we also use them to look at, how much people that we'll need, aside from the training, how much FTE that we'll need in this department. So our team got to grow, and after 9 years, we really mature. We venture into people analytics. We venture into people planning. As an outcome of the analytics, our team grew to myself, 2 data scientists, and a project manager. So to really oversee the Southern California region. And then at the end of the 9 years, basically 10 years, I was really, automating and streamlining the existing process that we have. So now at AON, I'm taking all the experience over to kind of serve the clients, in different sectors and different industry, to help them, solving their workforce planning challenges.
definitely a sought after and hot skill set to have. What a great space to be in. And so I'm curious. So you were at grad school. You studied economics, and then you moved into a development role. You worked with software developers.
No, workforce development. So what I was saying, what I meant was people development. Really looking at training and getting people certified, right? So and I was the data analyst, looking at how much people that will be needing training, and based on the need of the training, because I was at Kaiser Permanente. Is a healthcare company. You have all kinds of different jobs within that, right? You have nursing, you have lab, you have radiology, you have different hospital assistants and all that. Everybody has a representative. Everybody is screaming for training money, right? So my job was really to look at the data to see, hey, this is really the area that we need to focus on to provide training, to get people up to the skill set they will need, up to the certification that they will need, to run the business. So.
Is the goal to mitigate against attrition, or what would the goal for that be?
The goal.
I'm just curious because that's what I offer.
Mitigating attrition is the key. Increasing engagement. Boosting the sense of belonging, right? Because I mean, I have to say, Kaiser Permanente is a great company to work for. Even now I've left. They really take care of their members, their patients, and as well as their employees. So particularly in areas that the skill sets are being phased out, how do we train them so that we can redeploy them to other areas that's similar, and they can also so then they can stay with the company. So yeah.
So the last person I had on my podcast, or actually I spoke with them last week, it's going to air next week.
Okay.
He is the manager of operations, recruitment operations for Line. And AON actually came in and consulted and helped them with their recruitment operations in different areas. And so he gave you guys big props. You were a huge help for him. So it was kind of like really cool. But the reason I had him on this show is because he started, his name was Max Butler. He started as a recruiter, a tech recruiter, and then moved into a more of an analytics role as recruitment operations manager. So he is pulling all the data from their ATS, from their HRIS, and he's developing reports and sending those to the executive board, kind of like how many hires they made, more so on the for recruitment specifically. And I thought it was really interesting that somebody would move into an analytics role as a recruiter. And I asked him kind of what were some of the skill sets he was going to be developing as he moves forward. And, we talked a little bit about like the Tableau and, knowing SQL and perhaps a little bit of Python. And especially if you want to get into the more of the predictive modeling. So you yourself kind of came from the analytics side, and there was a question of who would require more of the training. Somebody who is the pure data scientist who had the Python and the programming languages, or somebody who was a recruiter and had to learn the programming languages. Probably, and there's lots of crash course or accelerator programs that you could take to learn Python, but understanding the business of it and how the operations and the recruitment works is essential to kind of being able to understand where that data is coming in from and how to make a story from it.
Right.
So I'm curious, like, what your thoughts were that, because you're coming from the other end, and we'll talk a little bit more about your skill sets, but I'm curious about what your thoughts are on that question.
Yeah, I think, programming language is a good language to learn. I mean, if you ask me, everybody should kind of learn the language a little bit. It's just, it could be your second language. I mean, my background was using SAS. So, when I was using SAS, I thought everybody should learn SAS. This is a beautiful language. Why people would not want to learn it, right? And now it's Python. Python is the key. So, and my team uses Python. As I was transitioning from Kaiser to AON, I had to teach myself Python. And I found that this is another wonderful language that we can all learn. And if you have interest in it, I definitely encourage you to kind of look into that. But but I understand that it's not for everyone. And understanding it, at least on the high level, would definitely help you understand, what are those people talking about? What are those programmer analytics people talking about? Why do they think it would be a challenge, to code such, certain things? But I mean, that's why but we all, we all like different things, right? So that's why we have a team. So there are people who are they're closer to the business side, they understand the operations. And there are people, from the analytics team who can translate all those into codes and come up with, analytic result. And then, but the key is, it's everybody's job to kind of being able to interpret the result and tell a story to come up with a solution around it. I mean, you can come up with the fanciest code in the world, and then if you can't tell a story, I mean, that's the end of story, right? I mean, there's no solution or implementation that could be driven by that. So it's everybody's responsibility to really understand the result, and then so you can translate the story a little better. So and I understand that everybody is becoming a little bit more tacky, because the world's becoming a little bit more tacky. I mean, Excel, right? I mean, is a very essential piece to learn, and throughout my career. A lot of people are using Excel now, and it's become a common language, right? So I would think that SQL or other maybe Python one day would become a common language for everybody.
So okay, so that's really that. Now, okay, so let me ask that a different question. If a company were in HR, we're looking to take advantage of, or to understand, be data driven in their HR function, and they could only hire one person, not a whole team, would they hire a data scientist, or should they hire somebody who comes from the recruitment side, who can learn the language, who maybe knows Excel? What do you think?
Well, you will hire somebody who knows both, right? I mean, but it's hard to. It's always.
I know, it's a hard question.
That is a hard question, and that's why talent of such kind is very hard to find. Is almost like different, two completely different skill set, right? I mean, somebody coming up with a business background, in HR. In talent acquisition, in compensation, they don't necessarily understand, predictive analytics, right? And you just really have to find this rare breed that, that who can do both. And if you can, build a team, right? I mean, like my experience and right, currently, I lead the data scientist team. And we also, have a consulting group, who can use the result to interpret and come up with a story around it, and guide the client to implement the solution based on the analytics result. And also, at the same time, communicate back to the data scientist and say, this is how we want to tweak the model. This is how we want to, change the forecast. Because of certain external reason, how do we want to modify the model in order to come up with a new result, to reflect the reality. So for larger projects,
that person's title is a business analyst.
You mean which one? The consultants.
Oh, the
Yeah.
consultants. Okay.
So we have a consultant team, we have a data scientist team, and they work, very closely together to achieve the goal. So, which is very similar to my past experience as an internal practitioner at Kaiser Permanente, where we have, a couple of data analysts and also a project manager who serves as a consultant to work on the project together. So.
I guess what I'm curious about is I'm curious about the career path for recruiters, because for recruitment, talent acquisition professionals, there's really not much else that you can transition into. And as I've been seeing this evolution of companies taking advantage of data and trying to be data driven, I feel like there is a new role for a recruiter to move into. And so I'm just kind of curious about that. So on your particular team, you hire data scientists and you have consultants. Those are the two, or project managers.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you look for in your data scientists? Do you typically, like, I'm just curious, like, what do you look for when you're hiring? I sound like I'm doing an intake call.
Right. I mean,
what do you look for in your next hire? And then, like, what do you also look for in the project manager?
So at my current team is, I would say that, we're consulting, we're serving different companies. So our team is a bit mature, right? So we have a mature, team in terms of, the skill set development and the expertise, that we have. So we're very specialized. So the data scientist, what I'm looking for is, somebody who is a data geek like me, right? Who can code Python, who can code SAS, who can build a statistical model that would explain, the business need that we're looking at, right? It could be attrition risk, it could be predictive analytics, it could be pay equity, right? So I would look for somebody who has a techie background. It could be from economics, it could be from computer science, it could be from statistics. Mm-hmm. Those are usually the background of my data scientist. On the consultant side, they're usually business experts, right? So they could be coming from internal practitioner, somebody who has worked in the comm department, somebody who has worked in the HR recruitment department, right? Who really understands, what is the challenge, what is the headache, what is the need, of the business, and then so they can talk with the data scientist to figure out the model together and then interpret the result. So on some smaller, and we really try to cross-train each other, right? Some of our consultants, they're expert in Tableau development. They're expert in, some of them can even code Python, right? And my data scientists, some of them are very good at telling a story to our clients. So as we as we progress and we're getting more experience and more exposure, both teams will get cross-trained a little bit, while maintaining their specialty. So if I can elaborate a little bit more on, if you're a smaller startup, right? You probably, one person is probably wearing a couple, multiple hat, right? Like, I've seen that there one person doing both COO and CFO job. Because you're smaller, you try to, the resources a little bit limited, and you try to do, the best that you could. You will want to hire somebody who has the capacity to do both, right? So even like in my experience, the clients that I've talked with, coming from HR, they're very good at, working on Excel. They're very good, they're even, some of them can even develop Tableau charts. So they will say, hey, just give me this data set. I mean, we can do the Tableau ourselves, or you can just start it, and then we can make changes, along the way. So so I see that, if you gotta be exposed to both sides of the worlds in order to be successful and be effective, right? So
yeah, Yeah, it is a fine line, and there's that division. It's like the data scientists and the data component and the programming and the and building that out, and then the person who's able to tell the story and understand the business side of it. And how do you marry those two? And sometimes the best way to do it is just to have two people
Exactly.
together. So that's interesting. So I'm curious. I know for me, when I went to San Diego State University, and I have a bachelor's of science in finance, and they did not teach programming. I mean, definitely tons of Excel. I'm an Excel guru, but did you learn that in college, or did you take courses, or are you self-taught in your programming languages? And what do you know? Do you know Python? It sounded like you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so I went to school quite a long time ago. So so when I was back in school, I was learning what is now pretty archaic tool or programming language, Stata, um, what would it call the mini tab. We touched a little bit upon SAS. So I really learned SAS, in my professional work at Kaiser Permanente. A little bit more self-teaching, mostly self-taught. And I mean, once you know one programming language, it's pretty easy to pick up another language. And I also mentioned Python as I transitioned to AON. Since my team uses Python, I just self-taught myself using Python. And it might sound a little bit too easy, because I have the background in different languages. It's pretty easy for me to transition to other languages. And Python is a very intuitive language to learn. So, and in between, I also picked up R from both college and from work. And the reason why we're using R and Python, mostly Python now, is that a lot of machine learning, a lot of those AI type of work is easier to do it in Python than other programming languages, because Python has the packages for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's a little bit about what did you take courses online like Code Academy, or did you just watch YouTube videos?
I just look at others' codes. and then just kind of Google it, try to Google different codes and different YouTube could be a good way to go, but there's a lot of online resources that kind of give you the kickoff for different languages.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, back then it's a little harder because you don't have Google. So for us to kind of come up with code, you really had to come up with your own code, or you have to know the people who have similar code that they are willing to share with you. But now it's very easy. You just Google it, and then there's like a reference and guidance for you to really just follow, and then teach yourself. When you're on the plane, or when you have some time just to sit down and then read through it is very convenient.
So that's what you're doing on your trip to London. You were studying.
On the flight, we always use the flight time to try to learn and do some work. So yeah.
You're so good, Enpei. Okay, so there's all this talk about predictive analytics within HR and AI, right? And I'm curious because when I think of AI, I think of predictive, and sometimes what I find is it's really more that these models or platforms are just pulling historical data or just aggregating data, and I don't see that as being predictive. So I'm just curious what your thoughts were on that, and where exactly the prediction is in these decisions.
Right. So, I mean, AI is, it might sound like a black box or like or something super fancy from people, looking from the outside. What it really does is using historical data to predict what's going to happen in the future, what has happened in the past to predict what's happening in the future. Is a different technique. What we used to have was, regression modeling. What we used to have was, time series, modeling. That's essentially, theoretically, it's very similar to AI and machine learning. Within machine learning, there's multiple layers also, right? So there are different type of technique that you can use, like deep learning, neural network, and all that, random forest, and all the technique that you can use depending on the need, right? Of your prediction. So say you want to predict attrition risk. Most of the time we use random forest, to kind of see, or decision tree to start with, right? So we look at different attributes. What was the pattern of people leaving? Before, was it pay? Certain, and then we parse paid out, into different category. We can say below 100,000 or above 100,000, or people who have gotten a 5% raise or above, or people who have gotten a raise 5% or less, right? So we use all these factors and then the algorithm, we kind of tell you which factor are more important, based on the past data again, right? And then to train it and then test it out and see, which algorithm will fit the best. And of course, we can get into overfitting and all those statistical term, on a separate conversation. But it's really coming up with the best algorithm and model and formula to run the prediction. So we can, so you probably have seen that, there's tool or algorithm telling you that, hey, we can predict up to how many percent accuracy of, so and so Enpei is Enpei going to leave, in the coming 6 or 10 or 12 months, right? And if Enpei is not so important, we don't have to care about that. I mean, even though he has a high chance of leaving, if Enpei is a high potential talent, whatever, how do we keep them, right? How do we keep this person? Do we give him a bump? Do we give him a promotion? Do we, stuff like that? So all this is a new technique, to look at predictive analytics. And in theory, it's very similar to the past techniques, but this is better. And now we have the program, we have the language to really run it, to come up with the result. So I hope that.
You get into that risk. Well, you answer a question, and then I have another question because it's so interesting. I'm very inquisitive. You into like that risk analysis, kind of like the actuarial, like when you're working in healthcare, which is so intriguing to me. Enpei, I'm going to tell you, there is a part of me that wishes I was a data scientist, but I am far too social to. But when I was pulling the numbers, like when I was a data analyst and I was sitting in front of my Excel spreadsheet, I would go through my lunch. It felt adventurous to me, just kind of going after those numbers and seeking it and just putting it together. It was like, oh, look at that 9. Oh, there it is. Like I felt like the crocodile hunters. But again, it's like I'm far more social, but it's so intriguing.
No, but that's the fun part. That's why we data scientists really love the work, is because that it really sucks you in, right? And then you're in the zone. You just tune the whole world out, and then you're so focused on getting the number right. You're so focused on getting the code right, to come up with the result, and then to tell a story, right? So that's the fun part. And then of course, not so fun when the code doesn't run, but but that's also why you get sucked in and really try to make things work, and make your Excel spreadsheet work, make it merge, and then come up with the result that you want. that is the fun part.
I've taken some Python courses and built out predictive models on price predictions. And it's a very simple program to use, and it's so interesting how actually how easy it is to develop that skill set. So I don't know, for any of our listeners, I feel like, especially because a lot of our listeners are talent acquisition recruitment professionals, because that's our audience.
Right.
But a lot of them who are interested in just being a tech recruiter and understanding how to recruit data scientists or developers. I mean, it's such a great skill set to have for yourself, I feel, in so many ways.
Yeah. So I mean, if you have the time and interest, I would encourage everybody, to just kind of start with, Googling Python and start with some easy exercise, like, how do you import a set of data, right? It could be the data they were working with, and then try to make some calculation out of it, make some, not merging, but, but use that same data set to come up with some simple calculation, or maybe you can already run some regression or predictive analytics out of that database, like, you have price, or you have, you have demand, product production, data inside it. Then you can really run, predictive analytics using some readily available package in Python that then you test it out. Python, I think, is not free, if I not remember it incorrectly. But R, is also an alternative. So there's always a big fight between R and Python, and to me, they are pretty agile. Both of them are pretty agile, and I can see, that's why there's people on the R camp, people on the Python camp, but but I mean, any language, programming language that you could pick up is just going to be beneficial.
Yes, that's interesting, like the Python versus the R, and I don't know if this is just maybe the clients or the people or the companies I've spoken with, that I feel like I see R more on digital or ad technologies, and maybe Python's maybe more internal, like you said, like pulling that historical data to make predictive decisions.
Yeah, well, it's really the user preference. So both are powerful. Both are pretty fast. And there are abundance of code out there for you to just borrow on the web. So so either one is a good tool to start with. And I think R is still free, to download for everybody. So.
Okay, so I have two more questions to leave you with.
Okay.
So you were talking about some of the things that you discovered within the data, and so I think you were talking about you're asking the question, why companies leave, why are they having attrition in certain areas, and like maybe it was a bad boss or something, but you mentioned something in regards to pay, and whether they got a pay increase or they got a raise, and I'm curious, do you in doing those analysis, what have you found has surprised hiring managers or your stakeholders the most in some of those results, those findings?
I can talk about a client that we worked with. The client really believed that they were paying their talents the fair market rate. They're at the benchmark, but then it's because of the market over competing the talent itself, that caused the attrition rate running high in a particular geographic area. And we went in and did a competitive assessment for them, just looking at certain jobs that have higher attrition rate. And we actually found out that their pay is a little bit lower than the benchmark, than the market. That came as a surprise for the client. And usually when there's a surprise, usually the client are not very happy about the surprise. They try to, because this is counterintuitive. This is against what their belief was. So they will try to attack your methodology. They try to but usually after a while we explain that, well, this is the same methodology that we apply for all the clients across the sector, in all areas, and this is indeed the finding that we have. The pay is a little bit lower than benchmark, and that could be the driver, to the attrition, and their attrition is, we're a little higher than the industry in that particular area, right? So, it is an inference, but it's a very strong inference. After a while, the client started to accept it, and decide to bump up the rates a little bit, and bump up the pay a little bit, to see that, hopefully to help the situation. So we're yet to check back in with them to see, how it goes, but we believe, that will solve the problem.
It's this challenge, or this delicate line, that in recruitment, talent acquisition kind of dances in negotiating new, when you're negotiating a close for a new hire,
right? And
you try to really understand what their non-monetary motivators are,
right?
And from the beginning, like what a new position with room to stretch your goals, or your skill sets, a career path, those non-monetary. But pay and salary is so very important. And I'm curious because, as much as you could talk about, oh, they're motivated by this and you're going to be doing this great work, it definitely comes down to whether or not I can afford to live on that. But that said, what do you think is in your experience, maybe one of the number one reasons people leave a company, or the top?
Yeah, well, I think we can look at this question, in a couple different angles. So the first angle is, pay is a driver, right? People, usually, attracted to a job, according to, because of the pay, right? So if you offered, 50% increase in your salary, it's very hard to turn it down. So client would come to us and say, hey, we're having problem hiring people. We have problem, people leaving. What can we do? There's a couple of solutions that we can offer. One is looking at, the salary benchmark, not for everybody, but only for the new hire, right? So what are the new hire benchmark, which could be largely different, from the incumbents, right? What we call the existing workforce. Just looking at a new hire, are we offering a lot less than your competitors? Then that could probably explain why that you have a problem, hiring people in the door. To avoid people from leaving, we have an analysis which we call conjoint analysis, which is a survey that was sent out to the existing workforce, or the incumbents, to really rank, to ask them, how do you rank, your preference in pay? And then we do segments by demographics, right? So because different age group probably have different need in terms of, the rewards that they want. Is it pay? Is it vacation time? Is it the insurance benefits? Is it is it family leave? Is it all these different type of reward? How would an employee rank them? And then we parse out different segments within this the workforce in order to, and then we can find out, in this particular demographic group within your workforce, they actually value vacation a lot more than pay. In the other demographic, they actually value bonus a lot more than base pay, right? Then we can cater and design different pay strategy for different work group to increase engagement, reduce attrition, and all that, right? So, and it's not just this is one package for everybody.
So it's it sounds like it depends on the client. There's not really the number one reason people leave companies is this.
No, No, yeah, there's no simple answer to that. Yeah.
That's true. It's true. It's true.
Yep. There's another $1 billion tool for you, Stacey.
We're just gonna have to get together. I've sketched something out. HR managers and hiring managers can walk around with their tablets and see who's at highest risk for leaving, and go in there, and it'll pop up. It'll tell them what they should say to them.
Yeah.
Make them feel better.
Right.
Engage them more. Ask them questions about their day.
Yeah, and just switch the dial, and then he'll work for you forever.
This person, yeah, switch a dial. Do these things that AON Consulting or Broadwell and Enpei Consulting tells you. We're going to get our SaaS product out there.
There you go.
All right. So you're going to be speaking at LAX Tech Recruit.
Okay.
Not at UC Irvine. That was our last event. You're going to be speaking in Playa Vista. Our theme is people analytics. I love this topic. I could talk about this all day. And
me too.
So I have so many, there's so many companies that are really trying to understand and get on board and really make decisions. And there's so many reasons for doing that. Obviously the ROI, right? And they're starting to understand that. But like, where do you start and how do you go? And that's why what you're doing is so important and it's so cool. And so I know we talked a lot about it a little bit, but you want to talk about what you're going to be speaking on?
I haven't really decided. I mean, this is in August, right? This is not tomorrow. So
no, it's next week. No, it's in July. And yes, it's July 18th. I hope you have that marked out.
Yeah.
So
it's on my calendar. I just, you're
going to be doing a 15-minute presentation. And what my audience really likes to see is not just ideas and not just futuristic things, but more so tangible. Let's open up your laptop. Let's build something out. Like, these are case studies. These are actionable things. These are ways that you can start doing this today. You can bring this back to your desk and just, meaty, tangible things tools that they can use. And that was the whole idea. It's 8 hours. It's one day. There's tons of content and there's 45 speakers all speaking on different topics. And the work that you've done with Kaiser and at AON Consulting, I think is just right on point with what our audience is trying to understand. So I think that's what you're going to be talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely elaborate on that. So, how to build up the function, right? How to really get, you have to get buy-in from the stakeholders, from the C-suite people. I was fortunate enough to work with clients, and also for Kaiser Permanente. They, the leadership has the vision and has the understanding that this is important. Right. A lot of time, I've heard from, other colleagues or, practitioners in the field. They had a hard time, selling this to the leadership, not because they don't care, because, they probably slammed by, the budget. They probably think about, what should they be developing, the new product, stuff like that, and kind of oversee, workforce planning. So, I mean, if so it really depends, right? So for people like fortunate like me, how do we get buy-in and then, get the conversation going, get all the partners, into the loop and talk about it and have a plan for workforce planning, right? Mm-hmm. And for colleagues or practitioners, they're still trying to get buy-in from the stakeholders. I would say that try to you have to highlight the importance of people. This is the most expensive resource in your company, and this is the resource that will drive your organization success and growth, right? You got to plan effectively around it in order to take the company to the next level. So, I mean, there are many talking points or advantages that you can kind of pitch it to the leadership. to kind of get awareness around it. So, so it really depends on the stage of where you're at, but I can certainly cover all those.
Certainly. I mean, we have a startup competition, so there will be startups who will be there, and certainly them being able to grow their organization. But I mean, a lot of them don't have budgets to be able to hire consultants. And you know, where do you begin as far as like being able to develop your teams, and who should you hire first? Should you hire the sales professional? Should you hire more senior level? And at what point in that growth? And that of course could be a conversation all its own. And then, but I imagine you more your clients are probably more mid to enterprise level. Would that be?
We have all spectrum. We have startups to post-IPO mature companies. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that's why, you know, to answer a question is hard, because they all come in from different angle and different, you know, they have different resource allocation, they have different priorities, right? They have different challenges. So it really depends on the stage of you know, the stage of development where you're at and what kind of questions that you're looking at. You know, to kind of come up with you know, solution and answers. So
I am so looking forward to your talk. You spoke at HCI. What is it? HCI?
Yes.
And which is how I found you, and so that's why I had reached out to you. And if any of our audience wants to, or listeners for the Tech Recruit podcast want to get hold of you, how can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. You know, just type in my name. My name is not very common, so I'm sure that will pop up.
It's Enpei Lam, Lam.
Correct. Or
they can go to AON Consulting and ask for you.
AON is a huge company. I don't know if my name would pop up. It's AON.com.
AON.com.
Yep.
AON.com. Okay.
Yep.
Super. Enpei, thank you so much for being on the Tech Recruit podcast. We enjoyed hearing your stories and listening to your experience. It's been so valuable. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at Tech Recruit.
No, thank you so much. It's my pleasure.